Hi, I'm Bella Bruce, and I'm here to welcome you to the lesson, Finessing the ACT test. I'm just going to give you some simple tips on how to ace the test. Your GPA and ACT scores will have a huge impact on college admission and scholarships. And if you play your cards right, then you can really benefit from maneuvering this test around. Tip number 1, be an expert. You should know everything about the test before you go in. You should know the sections of the test. You should know the timing for the test. You should know how it's scored. You should know if you have a break. Can you use a calculator? How you should manage your test questions, your strengths and weaknesses. The only way to do this is to be an expert on the test. Just like you would go in and take a driver's license test. You're not going to go in to get your driver's license and not be able to drive because you've never driven before. So when you take the ACT test, you should be an expert. You should have practiced. You should know the tips. You should know how it's scored. You should know what's coming next. And that way you will be on your way to success. In this slide, you're going to see the different sections of the ACT. So the ACT test is always in the same order, so there's no surprises. You have English and then math, and then you'll get a break. Then you have reading and science. All the test questions aren't in order of difficulty, but for example, like the math is. So number 1 question is the easiest. Number 60 will be the hardest. You'll see the timing per question. So you have like 1 minute per question on the math test. That doesn't mean that you necessarily have to spend 1 minute on each question, because the questions at the beginning are much easier than the ones at the end. But this does allow you to have some kind of timing. Reading section is always in the same order as far as the reading passages. So you will have like a prose fiction, then a social science, a humanities, and a science. So you should always practice the test first. That way you know which passages you want to do first. You should always do your best passages at the beginning. So for example, if you have a passage on ballet or if you have a passage on sea cucumbers, then whichever one you tend to do better on, then you can start with that one. There's also an essay option. Not a lot of people take that, but some schools still require it. So I would suggest that you look and see if any of your schools require that option. If you do take that part of the test, then it will be after the regular test is over. This slide is about the content that's covered. I only decided to use the math content because that's where most students have misconceptions. So a lot of students think that the whole test is trig. But you can tell by the slide that there's a lot of different content that's covered. So if you're taking the test before you've had trig or before Algebra 2, you could still answer many questions correctly, and don't worry too much about trig. If you know Sokotoa, then you can get through most of those questions anyway. It's always great to have a goal. So you need to have a score goal so that you can get your mind in the right setting. So for example, as far as the test is scored, then you can tell if you're looking for, like, let's say an average score is a 19. In Tennessee, the Hope Scholarship, you have to have a 21 to receive that money and that scholarship. So if you look at the chart in front of us, let's just take math, for example. So if you look at math, there's 60 questions altogether. And if you get only half of them right, so if you look where it says 29 to 30, then that's already a score of 21. So when you take the ACT test, it's not like when you're taking a test in school. It is scored differently. If you took a test in school where you had 10 questions and you missed 5, then you would fail the test. But on the ACT, to be above national average, you only have to get half of the questions right, or actually even a little less. Tip number 2, practice doesn't always make perfect. You need to always practice from real tests. There's a lot of books out there that don't have real tests. There's a couple of sources. You can go to the ACT website and get free tests. There's also the official ACT prep guide that has actual retired tests, this is a great book to use because it also gives you the test, but it will give you the explanations after each test. So if you happen to miss number 17 on math, you're not wanting to know how to work it, you can just go to the explanations and you can review. So when you practice, you should also learn from your mistakes. So a lot of people will take a time test over and over and over, and they never look to see what they missed. So for example, let's say you miss an absolute value, number 1 on the math test, on practice test number 1. If you don't fix that mistake, then the next time you take a test, then you're going to miss absolute value again. So one of the things about practicing, and the reason I call this slide and this tip, practice doesn't make perfect, is because if you practice and practice and practice just taking the test and timing yourself, that necessarily doesn't bring your score up. You should practice, review, fix your mistakes, and then take another test. Tip number 3, elimination and common sense. So you should always cross out your wrong answers. Answers are your friends. Don't be afraid of them. Look for the wrong answer first. Cross it out. And don't just cross out the letter. Don't just cross out A or the B or the C or the D, but cross it out all the way through. You can always write on your test booklet during test day for the ACT or any kind of standardized test. So you should cross it all the way out. That way, the answers that you have left will be more clear to you. So once again, always look for the wrong answers first, cross them out, and then you can focus. Some wrong answers are just obvious. The outliers are your friends too. So if you have a question and you see an obvious answer, it just makes the process easier for you. Be systematic in your approach and you'll see. I've got an example next. So this is an example of a math question where you can just use common sense. So for example, here it is. In a group of 250 students, 40 are seniors. What percentage of the group are seniors? The first thing I would do here is I would take 250 and just get 10% of that. So if you take the 0 off, then you're at 25. Now look at your answer choices. A, B, and C are all under 10%, so you know it can't be those. If you look at the answer choice E, that's 40%, which is almost 50%, and you only have 40 seniors, so you know it can't be that. So you actually could do this test question with just common sense and elimination. So that's what I would suggest when looking at these types of math questions. Tip number 4, bubbles give you breaks. So bubble one page at a time. Many students go back and forth from their test booklet to their answer sheet, and think about that for just a second. So you have an English test. It has 75 questions. You're right in the middle of reading a paragraph. There's 4 questions in the paragraph, and you have to stop after each one, go to your bubble sheet and bubble, and then come back and concentrate. Instead, stay focused on the page, mark your answers in your book, and at the end of the page, you get a break. So you give your brain a little break, you get to kind of refocus again, and it actually will save you a little bit of time. It's about 2.5 minutes on the English test. Many students are so used to bubbling as they go. There's a little bit of a learning curve here, but this is probably the number 1 tip that students tell me that they actually feel like helped them the most. Watch your time, literally. Don't watch your time every single second, but do watch your time. The proctor will put the time on the board so you'll know how much time that you have left, but you should also wear a watch to the test. If you bring a digital watch, do not bring one that beeps. So if you can't figure out how the beeper works, then go ahead and wear an analog watch. And actually, an analog watch is nice because you can manipulate it. So you could put, let's take for example, the math test. You could put the minute hand on the 12, and when 60 minutes is over, the minute hand's gonna be on the 12 again. So you can actually just glance down and look. That's what I do when I time students in my class. I just kind of glance down and see how much time is left. I'm like, about 20 minutes, about 10 minutes, about 5 minutes left. So that's a really good way to do that. You need to always pace yourself and remember that all the questions are worth the same. So if you rush at the beginning and miss, it's not really worth getting to the end. So try to get the first 30 right. You're already at a 21. Then you just inch up from there. 5 more right gives you a couple of more points. 5 more right gives you more points. Many students will spin around a question. So they will look at the question, they work it out, they look at the answers, none of them match up, they erase their work, then they work it out again, but they end up working it out the exact same way. And that's what I call spinning. So you can just keep spinning around the question. If that happens to you, then you should just stop, look back at the question, make sure you didn't miss anything, and then think about how to work the problem and proceed from there. If you go past a minute, I would just mark an answer and then go to the next question. Tip number 6, have an emergency plan. There's always going to be a 5-minute warning. So when you do get a 5-minute warning, don't give up. 5 minutes is a lot of seconds. So you can get 3 or 4 more points on the whole test if you just keep working to the very end till they say pencils down. Okay? There's a 1-minute warning. At this point, you should just go ahead and bubble. Stay focused. Bubble one letter, pick one letter of the day, pick it, and then you can always still look at the questions and erase and go back. Tip number 7, break time is not nap time. Rejuvenate your brain during the break. You can get up, you can walk out, you can go to the restroom, you can have a small snack that you bring with you. You can also have a bottled water. You can't obviously drink that during the test, but you should have something that rejuvenates you. Don't lay your head down. When you lay your head down, that brings on negativity, and a lot of students don't really recover from that. And the next tests that are coming up will be reading and science. So you need to be rejuvenated, have a Tic Tac or something, and just get ready to finish the test out. There's not that much longer, so that's a good way to use your break time. Tip number 8, breakfast is for champions. Don't test with an empty stomach. A lot of students are too nervous in the morning, or they try to eat a really big breakfast like, a triple non-fat cappuccino or some, crazy full breakfast bar. Don't do that. Just eat something simple like a granola bar or something that you would normally eat on a normal test day at school. Think about it as like you're taking an exam at school, how you would wake up and how you would get to ready to go. So, if you just act like it's a normal day, then the anxiety will end. Tip number 9, letter C is not always the best answer. So many of my students come into my class and the first thing they say is, should I guess C if I'm not sure? And it's just something that I think a lot of people talk about. A lot of people just think that that's the best answer, but it's not always the best choice, because think about the test makers that are making the test. Once again, let's go back to the math test. They're in order of difficulty. So if you're in the last 10, how many students do you think are guessing? Almost everyone at this point. And on the math test, there's 5 answer choices. So C is that natural choice. And actually, the test makers stay a little bit away from that test answer. So if that's your go-to answer, you may want to switch it up just a little bit. Just pick one letter. Don't bubble your significant other's name. Don't bubble your favorite band. Don't make a design. Don't Christmas tree it. Just pick one letter. Statistically, that's going to be better. You could pick the letter A and go straight down if you've got 10 left. You're most likely going to get more correct that way than if you just randomly guess. Tip number 10, and the final tip, is confidence is key. So you've already prepared for the test. You already know your strengths and weaknesses, hopefully, by this point. Have a positive attitude. Walk into the test like you never have to take this test again. Walk in, wear something nice. You don't have to wear, your a tuxedo or a prom dress or anything, but don't also wear your pajamas. You want to come in, maybe wear your favorite concert t-shirt or something that makes you feel good. You also don't want to walk in 1 minute before the test. You want to be prepared. You want to have all of your things in the car the night before. You want to make sure that your calculator has batteries. Just be prepared and know where your testing site is. A lot of students will get lost on testing day. If it's a school you're not familiar with, you should take a ride to the school, make sure how long it's going to take you to get there, those kind of things. So just be a smart test taker, okay? If you decide to use all of these tips, then you should be ready for success. You should go in there, you should ace the test, and maybe you'll never have to take the test again, and maybe you'll get into the college of your dreams and get all the scholarships that you've ever wanted.